Hey Dayspring, welcome back to our next Sunday Behind the Scenes episode. Today we have our Senior Pastor Kristen Williamson with us. Thanks for being here, Kristen.
Pleasure.
It's awesome to do it. So today we're going to chat about your sermon from Sunday, because it's been ages since we've seen you preach, and it's so awesome to see you preach, which is cool.
Yeah.
We just want to talk about that a bit today. So first question is, what do you love most about preaching? And what do you find most difficult in preaching? So either from preparation or delivery on a Sunday.
Yep. Well, I think what I love most about it is probably the preparation side of things.
Yep.
I love the Word. I love the Word of God, and preparing is just that opportunity to really crack that thing open and learn. And I find that I'm just in awe again at how His Word it's living. It's not just ink on page. It's alive. And you those moments when you're studying and you see how things connect together, it's like a rabbit's trail. Sometimes I have to pull myself back.
Did you go too deep?
yeah, or just one thing kind of, something else might spark my interest, and so I'll be off and I'm like, nope, that's for later, come back to it. Yeah, so rein that back a little bit. And I love learning anyway, and so I find that when I'm preparing, I'm learning too, and so I just love all that side of preparation. So the things that I don't like as much about preaching probably isn't a surprise to many, but it's probably the delivery.
I think with everyone, right?
The actual preaching, my nerves can get the beat in the days, hours, minutes, and seconds leading up to delivery. So yeah, that's probably what I love about preaching and what I possibly don't love so much.
On another note, how did you find doing it on Sunday, looking at a camera preaching? Because normally you're in front of like 400 people, but on Sunday it was a cameraman. How was that?
It was probably a little bit difficult. I mean, I've done when Aaron and I have filmed things for Vision Sundays and things like that. So I've had a little bit experience with it. But when you're delivering a message, when you've picked up, during your preparation time, God's heart, for the people that you're speaking to, it's a lot easier in that moment when you're seeing faces to kind of pick up again God's heart for them. When you're staring at a little black circle with light in your face, it did feel a little different. But I did feel, just a grace there on Sunday morning to connect back with how he was feeling. And so, yeah, it was good.
It's awesome. And it came across really well. Like, I loved your message. I was like, saying some really good things. It was awesome.
Oh, thanks.
So second question, if you had more time, because, on Sundays you've only got, half an hour to preach. So you're limited with that. What would you have liked to spend more time exploring in your sermon yesterday, and why?
Yeah. I possibly would have loved to have spent a little bit more time unpacking. I think it was my third point around just some of the issues of, control. And I found in my preparation time, that was probably one of the areas that, I went off into a bit of a rabbit's warren, and I had to pull myself back. It's just an interesting one because, my conversations with people over the years, some people aren't aware that the desire to control things they don't see themselves that way. I think people often them in their thinking, they think somebody who controls things is often somebody who is more assertive or aggressive, or that kind of personality.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's not until you scratch the surface when you realize, if things don't go a particular way that you were wanting or expecting, or you weren't getting the response you were looking for, or something happens that isn't predictable and that sends you to a place of anxiety or irritability, or the need to just withdraw because it's just
too much.
They are issues of control.
That's interesting.
Something in you that is still wanting to have a controlled thing, even though, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Was there like a practical thing you got out of that, like how to deal with that?
Well, I picked up on that on Sunday. It really is just it's just the opposite of the invitation that we have from Jesus. And that's just to surrender and to trust him, because, and it sounds simple, but when you think about it, if you're still needing to hang on to your little list of requirements that make you happy, comfortable, or that is your criteria for success, then that's not surrender.
No.
Quite often God will have us, or we're in situations, or we're with people for his purposes, and they're not. So yeah, it's a surrender and it's a trusting thing. And I think that that's a lifelong journey, that
Definitely.
get that one working well in our lives.
Oh, 100%. That's awesome. And so then I guess to wrap up, what aspect of your sermon would you love us as like a Dayspring community to transform in? Like what sort of aspects do you see that transformation happening?
Yeah. I think this is an easy one for me. It would probably be going to how I talked about Peter and how Jesus saw Peter and how Peter saw himself. I think if all of us had just greater revelation, or a growing revelation of how he sees us, I think that is incredible. Peter denied Jesus. He failed. He had a moment of weakness, but that's not what Jesus saw. When Jesus saw him, in his fishing boat, right back when he chose him, he knew ahead of time, Peter's humanity. Yeah, and he still chose him. He was still full of hope and joy. Looking at Peter that day, I'm sure of it, and called him and chose him. And I think there's something in that for all of us. We can disqualify ourselves very quickly because we're so aware of our humanity. And we can put off, withholding, wanting to be used by God, or any of those things because of how we see ourselves. And I think if we, as a people, as a community, as individuals, allow him to transform how we see ourselves, and let him influence and begin to see ourselves how he sees us, I think, the way that we walk with him, and the way that he uses us, and the way that we live life with him, I think, the limits are taken off. There's just such greater levels of that if we can get more of a revelation of how he sees us.
That's awesome. And I think just the way that story ends with Peter, of how Jesus reinstates him, knowing that he was going to make that mistake, but then at the end just comes full circle back to no, you're still my disciple, you're still my main guy. That's awesome. Hey.
Yep. Absolutely. It's powerful. It's absolutely powerful, because if Jesus doesn't disqualify us, if he doesn't count us out, then who are we to do that?
Exactly right. Who gives us that authority?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So good. Awesome. Well, that's our time up. Goes quick, hey?
Easy.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. That was so good. Join us all next week for Sunday Behind the Scenes. See you guys.
Bye.